The storm came without warning, as storms always did on the forgotten island. Mara stood at the edge of the cliff, her bare feet gripping the wet stone, watching the sky tear itself apart in shades of violet and black. Lightning carved through the clouds like the fingers of an angry god, and the ocean below thrashed against the rocks with a violence that made her chest tighten. She had lived alone here for 7 years. 7 years since the ship that was supposed to take her to the mainland never returned. 7 years since her father's promises turned to dust. Since the village elders decided she was cursed. Since they left her with nothing but a knife, a fishing net, and the crushing weight of solitude. The island was small, barely 3 miles across, covered in twisted palms, volcanic rock, and the ruins of what might have once been a settlement. Mara had made a life here, if you could call it that. She collected rainwater in hollowed stones, ate coconuts and wild figs, caught fish when the tide was kind. She spoke to the birds because silence was worse than madness. She had stopped counting days after the first year. Time meant nothing when tomorrow was identical to yesterday, but tonight was different. Through the sheets of rain, she saw it, a dark shape rolling in the surf below. At first, she thought it was driftwood or perhaps a dead whale, but then it moved. An arm, a leg, a body. No, she whispered, stepping back. No, no, no. She had learned to trust nothing that came from the sea. The ocean was not kind. It gave nothing without taking more in return. But even as fear coiled in her stomach, her feet were already moving. Scrambling down the treacherous path toward the shore, the man was face down in the shallows, waves pushing him against the rocks like a broken toy. His clothes were torn, his back covered in blood, some fresh, some dried into dark streaks across his tanned skin. Strange tattoos covered his arms, serpents, skulls, ships with billowing sails. And around his neck, half buried in the sand, hung a medallion that caught the lightning's flash. A royal crest, unmistakable even in the storm's fury. Mara grabbed him under the arms and pulled. He was heavy, waterlogged, and limp. She dragged him inch by agonizing inch up the beach, her muscles screaming, her breath coming in ragged gasps. By the time she got him to her hut, a lean-to of salvaged wood and palm fronds pressed against the cliff face, she was shaking with exhaustion. She rolled him onto his side. Water poured from his mouth. His chest rose once weakly, then again. Alive, barely. You better be worth this, she muttered, already tearing strips from her only blanket to bind his wounds. His back was a mess, deep gashes from something sharp, maybe a sword, maybe rocks. She cleaned them with rainwater, pressed crushed herbs she'd learned to use for infection, and wrapped him as best she could. His breathing steadied, but he didn't wake. For 3 days, he lay unconscious in her hut while Mara kept vigil. She fed him water drop by drop, changed his bandages, and watched his face for signs of life. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and hands that were calloused but steady even in sleep. On the 4th morning, his eyes opened. They were grey like the sea before a storm, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, broken glass and salt. "Nowhere," Mara said, sitting back on her heels. "An island with no name. You washed ashore." He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back.
"How long?"
4 days. His hand moved to his chest, searching, and his expression darkened when he found the medallion still there. Relief, then something else, anger maybe, or fear. "Who are you?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her sun-darkened skin, her matted hair, the wildness in her eyes that came from years without human contact. "Does it matter?" he finally said. "You're in my home. I saved your life. Yes, it matters." A bitter smile tugged at his lips. "Then call me Kyle, that's all you need to know. And the rest? The blood? The tattoos? That medallion? Dangerous questions, girl. My name is Mara," she snapped. "And dangerous is all I've had for 7 years. Something in her voice made him look at her differently, not with pity, but recognition. Like he understood what it meant to survive when the world wanted you dead. I'm a pirate, he said finally. Or I was. Before they betrayed me, they, my crew, my brothers, the men I would have died for, his jaw clenched. They took everything, my ship, my reputation, my fleet, left me to rot on a prison ship bound for the gallows, but you escaped. I killed 12 men to do it. He said it without pride or shame, just fact. Stole a lifeboat. Thought I could make it to the Crescent Isles. The storm had other plans. Mara sat back, processing. A pirate, a murderer, a man marked by violence and vengeance. She should throw him back into the sea. She should run, but she didn't. Why did they betray you? She asked instead. Kyle's eyes darkened. Because I refused to become a monster. Because there are lines even pirates shouldn't cross, and I drew mine. So they drew theirs. Around my throat the wind howled outside, rattling the hut's walls. Mara stood, suddenly aware of how small the space was, how close they were. Rest, she said quietly. You're still weak. Mara, she paused at the entrance. Thank you, he said. For not leaving me to die, she didn't answer. Because deep down, beneath the fear and the caution, a terrible thought was taking root. Maybe she hadn't saved him. Maybe he had saved her. From the loneliness, from the silence, from the slow death of a life without purpose. Outside, the ocean whispered secrets she couldn't yet hear. And on the horizon, still invisible, still days away, 100 ships began to turn their course toward a forgotten island, toward a girl who had broken her solitude, toward a pirate who had broken his chains, toward a destiny neither of them could escape. Kyle healed faster than Mara expected. By the end of the first week he was walking, slowly, painfully, but walking. By the second, he was helping her gather firewood, check her fishing traps, and reinforce the hut against the coming rainy season. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He told her about the sea in fragments, stories of ports that smelled like spice and blood, of storms that swallowed ships whole, of treasures buried on islands that didn't exist on any map. He spoke of his crew with a mixture of bitterness and longing, like a man mourning a family that had tried to kill him. They called me Captain, he said one night, as they sat by the fire outside the hut. The stars above were impossibly bright, untouched by the smoke and lights of civilization. Not because I was the strongest or the cruelest, because I kept them alive. Because I made them rich. Because I gave them something to believe in. And they repaid you with betrayal, Mara said. They repaid me with survival. He poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the darkness. My first mate, Garin, he was like a brother to me. Saved my life in Port Raven when a merchant's guards cornered me. I thought we were bonded by blood. What changed? I refused an order from someone bigger than all of us. His voice dropped. There's a man, more legend than flesh, called the Ivory King, controls half the pirate fleets in the eastern seas. He wanted me to raid a civilian convoy. Women, children, merchants with nothing. I said no. Mara's breath caught. So they turned on you. Garin gave me a choice, obey the king or face the crew's judgment. I chose judgment. Thought I could fight my way out, take control back. I was wrong. He touched his side, where the deepest wound had been. They held me down, while Garin carved his mark into my ribs. Then they threw me in chains and sold me to a naval prison ship. How did you escape? Kale's smile was sharp, dangerous. I waited, learned the guards' routines. Made friends with a cook who owed me a debt from years ago. When the storm hit, I made my move. Killed the captain, freed 3 other prisoners, stole a lifeboat. The others didn't make it, and now I'm here with you, on an island that doesn't exist, recovering from wounds that should have killed me, talking to a woman who lives alone like a ghost. Mara bristled. I'm not a ghost. No, he agreed, meeting her eyes. You're something else. Something stronger. The firelight caught the planes of his face, the scars, the exhaustion that ran deeper than flesh. For a moment, Mara forgot to breathe. Why are you really here, Kale? She asked softly. What are you running from? I'm not running. His voice was steel. I'm waiting. For what? For them to find me. Her blood went cold. Your crew? My fleet. He stood, walking to the edge of the firelight, staring out at the black ocean. Before Garin took my ship, I had 12 vessels under my command. The Serpent's Breath, the fastest brigantine in the eastern seas. I built that fleet from nothing. Every captain, every sailor, every cannon was chosen by me. I made them legends, but they betrayed you, not all of them. He turned back to her, and there was something fierce and terrible in his expression. Some stayed loyal. Some refused Garin's orders. And some have been searching for me ever since I escaped. Mara's heart hammered. You think they'll find you? Here? I know they will. He touched the medallion at his throat, the royal crest she'd noticed that first night. This isn't just decoration. It's a beacon. A signal only my captains know how to read. When I was thrown into the sea, when I thought I would die, I activated it. Sent out a call. You're insane, she whispered. You'll bring war to this island. I'll bring justice. Justice? She stood, anger flooding through her. You'll bring death, violence. Everything I've escaped by living here alone. You didn't escape anything, Mara. His voice was quiet but cutting. You're in prison. Just a prettier one. The words hit like a physical blow. She wanted to scream at him, to throw him back into the sea, to return to the blessed numbness of solitude. But he was right. God help her, he was right. Why did you save me? Kyle asked, stepping closer. Really? You could have left me on that beach. Could have let the ocean finish what it started. Why didn't you? Mara's throat tightened. Because I know what it's like to be abandoned. To be left to die. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Even a pirate. Even a pirate. Something shifted between them. A recognition, a connection forged in shared pain and defiance. Cale reached out, his calloused hand gentle as it touched her shoulder. When they come, he said, I won't let them hurt you. I promise. You can't promise that. I can. And I will. Before Mara could respond, a sound reached them, distant but unmistakable. A low rhythmic boom. Then another. And another. Cannon fire. Cale's head snapped toward the ocean, his body going rigid. No, not yet. It's too soon. But Mara saw it, saw what he couldn't yet believe. The horizon, which had been empty moments ago, was now filled with tiny lights. Dozens of them, hundreds, ships. Kyle, she breathed. Look! He turned, and the color drained from his face. The entire eastern horizon was alive with sails, black against the pre-dawn sky. Each one bearing a flag she couldn't make out, but knew instinctively meant violence. They moved in formation, a fleet so vast it seemed to swallow the stars. And at their center, one ship larger than all the others, its prow carved into the shape of a serpent. The Serpent's Breath, Kyle whispered. They found me. Is that good or bad? His expression was unreadable, hope and terror and fury all at once. I don't know. But we're about to find out. The cannons fired again, closer now. Not at the island, at each other. The fleet was at war with itself, two factions tearing each other apart in the water. They're fighting, Mara said. Why are they fighting? Because Garin isn't the only one who wants me dead. Cale grabbed her arm, his grip urgent. And because some of them want me alive. This is it, Mara, the reckoning. Everything I've survived, everything I've built, it all ends at dawn. The sky was beginning to lighten, turning the black ocean to iron gray. The ships were close enough now that Mara could see their details. The cannons, the crews, the flags bearing symbols of serpents and skulls and crowns. 100 ships, all for one man. What do we do? She asked. Cale looked at her. And for the first time since she'd found him bleeding on the beach, he smiled, really smiled. Wild and reckless and alive. We fight. Dawn broke like a wound across the sky, red and gold bleeding into bruised purple, painting the 100 ships in shades of fire and shadow. Mara stood at the cliff's edge beside Cale, her heart a war drum in her chest, watching as the fleet divided itself like a living thing splitting down the middle. On the left, 50 ships flew black flags bearing a white serpent, Kyle's original symbol, she realized. His loyalists. On the right, 50 more flew crimson flags with a crowned skull, Garin's faction, backed by the mysterious Ivory King. Between them, The ocean churned with cannon smoke and the screams of dying men. "This is madness," Mara breathed. "They're destroying each other for you." "Not for me." Kyle's voice was grim, his eyes tracking the movements of each ship like a chess master studying a board. "For what I represent. For the choice between honor and power, between brotherhood and gold. I forced that choice on them when I refused the Ivory King. Now they're answering." A cannonball shrieked overhead, close enough that Mara felt the displaced air like a slap. It crashed into the cliff face below, sending rocks tumbling into the surf. "They'll hit the island," she said, panic rising. "They'll destroy everything. Not if I stop them first." Kyle turned to her, his expression fierce. "I need you to trust me, Mara. Can you do that?" Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide in the deepest cave and let the storm pass. But when she looked at him, this wounded pirate who had told her stories by firelight, who had helped her repair her hut, who had called her something stronger than a ghost, she found herself nodding. "What do you need me to do?" "Light the signal fire, the big one, on the highest peak. Can you reach it?" She knew the place he meant, a rocky summit at the island's center, where ancient stones formed a rough circle. She'd found it years ago, wondered what purpose it served. "Yes, but why?" "Because my ships need to know where I am. Need to know I'm alive and ready to lead them." He gripped her shoulders, his grey eyes boring into hers. "Light that fire and this war ends, one way or another. And if it ends badly, then we die together. Better than dying alone." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like a promise, like the first real promise anyone had made her in 7 years. "Go," Kyle said. "Now." Mara ran. She knew this island better than she knew her own face, every path, every handhold, every shortcut through the tangled vegetation. Her bare feet flew over volcanic rock, her lungs burned with effort, but she didn't stop. Behind her, the cannon fire intensified, the sound like the world tearing itself apart. When she reached the summit, she found the ancient stone circle waiting, and inside it, a massive pile of driftwood she'd collected over the years, never knowing why. "Destiny," she thought wildly. This was always meant to happen. She struck her flint with trembling hands, once, twice, 3 times. Sparks caught in the dry tinder. Flames rose, hungry and bright, consuming the driftwood with shocking speed. Within minutes, a column of smoke rose into the dawn sky, visible for miles. From her vantage point, Mara could see the entire battle. The Loyalist ships were being pushed back, outnumbered and outgunned. Garen's flagship, a massive man-o'-war with triple gun decks, was cutting through them like a knife, its cannons roaring death. Then the signal fire reached its full height, and everything changed. The Loyalist ships saw it first. One by one, they disengaged from combat, turning toward the island with sudden, coordinated purpose. Their cannons fell silent, their sails adjusted, catching the wind with practiced precision. They were coming for their captain. On the crimson-flagged side, chaos erupted. Garen's flagship fired a full broadside at the nearest Loyalist vessel, but the shot went wide, missing as the target ship expertly dodged. Other Crimson ships tried to give chase, but they were scattered, disorganized, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tactics. Mara saw it then. Saw why Kale had been captain, why men had followed him. He had trained them, taught them to move as one, to read signals, to anticipate his commands, even when he wasn't there. The Loyalist fleet formed a protective crescent around the island's harbor, their broadsides facing outward, a wall of wood and iron that dared Garen to approach. And at the center of that crescent, the Serpent's Breath, Kale's flagship, dropped anchor. Mara scrambled back down the mountain, her heart in her throat. By the time she reached the beach, the first longboats were already being lowered from the Serpent's Breath, filled with armed men rowing hard for shore. Kyle stood waiting at the water's edge, his posture straight despite his healing wounds, his hand resting on a sword he'd salvaged from Mara's collection of beach debris. When the first boat beached, a massive man with a braided beard leaped out, fell to his knees in the surf, and bowed his head. "Captain," the man said, his voice breaking, "we thought you were dead." "I nearly was, Rorik," Kyle's voice carried across the beach, strong and commanding. "But I'm not easy to kill. As Garin is about to learn, more boats arrived, more men, 50, 100, all of them kneeling before their returned captain. Mara watched in awe as Kale moved among them, gripping shoulders, calling names, transforming from wounded fugitive to leader in the space of moments. Then he turned back to the ships, raised his sword and roared, "Bring me Garin!" The fleet erupted in answering shouts, a sound so loud it drowned out the ocean itself. But the Crimson ships weren't retreating. They were regrouping, forming their own line, preparing for a final assault. And at their head, Garin's flagship began to move, directly toward the island, all guns aimed at the beach. "He's going to bombard us," Rorik said grimly. "We need to get you back to the ship, Captain. You're exposed here." "No." Kyle's voice was iron. "Let him come. Let him see what happens when you betray Brotherhood for gold." Mara grabbed his arm. "Kale, this is suicide. You just got your fleet back. Don't throw it away for pride." He looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "This isn't pride, Mara, this is justice, and it has to be witnessed." Garin's flagship was close enough now that she could see figures on the deck, and at the prow, a man in a crimson coat, his face twisted with rage. "Kyle!" Garin's voice carried across the water, amplified by fury. "You should have stayed dead. You should have stayed loyal." Kyle shouted back. "But here we are, brother. You sold your soul to the Ivory King, and for what? Ships you can't control, men who fear you instead of following you. You've already lost." "I've lost nothing." Garin raised his hand, and Mara saw the cannons being readied. "And when I bury you on that beach, the Ivory King will make me admiral of the entire Eastern Fleet. Your loyalty meant nothing. Your honor meant nothing. Only power matters." Kyle said nothing. He simply stood there, sword raised, defiant. The cannons fired, but not at the beach. Garin's own crew had turned on him, mutiny erupting on his deck, men who had once served Kale taking their chance to choose honor over fear. The cannonballs splashed harmlessly into the ocean as fighting erupted on every Crimson ship. Within an hour, it was over. Garin was brought to the beach in chains, his crimson coat torn, his face bloodied. He fell to his knees before Kale, hatred and defeat warring in his eyes. "Do it," Garin spat. "Kill me. Prove you're no different than me." Kyle stared at his former first mate for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No, I won't kill you, Garin, because unlike you, I remember who I am." He turned to his crew. "Take him to the Serpent's Breath. Lock him in the brig. He'll face trial at Port Crescent." As they dragged Garin away, Kale finally lowered his sword. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. Mara approached him slowly. "You won. We won," he corrected. "If you hadn't lit that fire, if I hadn't saved you, none of this would have happened." He smiled, tired, genuine, alive. "Then I owe you more than my life, Mara. I owe you my future." The fleet began preparations to sail, but Kyle didn't move. He stood there on the beach, looking between the ships and the island, between the life he'd lost and reclaimed, and the girl who had changed everything. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Mara's breath caught. "What? Come with me! Leave this island. See the world you've been denied. Sail with us." He took her hand. "I know you're afraid. I know this place has been your prison and your sanctuary. But Mara, you saved a pirate's life. Don't you want to see what that means?" The ocean stretched before her, vast and terrifying and full of possibility. Behind her, the island waited, safe, known, empty. For 7 years, she had survived. Now finally she could live. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The Serpent's Breath was more magnificent than Mara had imagined from the shore. 3-masted and sleek, its deck was polished mahogany, inlaid with mother-of-pearl, that caught the morning light like scattered stars. She stood in the captain's quarters, watching her island shrink to a green dot on an endless blue canvas. "Regrets?" Kale appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of rum and citrus. "No," Mara said, surprising herself with the truth. He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing. "The crew is nervous about you," Kyle admitted. A woman on a pirate ship is considered bad luck. But you stay. I didn't reclaim my fleet just to let outdated superstitions dictate who I keep company with. You're the person who saved my life when you had every reason not to, he continued. You're the first person in years who looked at me and didn't see a tool or a threat. Just a man. Outside, the fleet maintained formation, 47 ships, the largest pirate armada in the eastern seas. What happens now? Mara asked. With Garin? With the Ivory King? Garin will face trial at Port Crescent. As for the Ivory King, he wanted to control my fleet, make me his puppet admiral. But he rules through fear, not loyalty. Men like that always fall eventually, and you'll help him fall. Gale's smile was sharp as a blade. I'll help Justice find him. A knock interrupted them. Rorik's massive frame filled the entrance. Captain, you asked to be told when we reached open ocean. Assemble the crew on deck. It's time. On deck, Kyle climbed to the quarterdeck, his voice carrying across the water with commanding authority. Brothers! You came when I called. You chose honor when gold was offered, and loyalty when betrayal seemed safer. We are pirates, but we are not monsters. We fight against tyrants who would grind the common folk beneath their jeweled heels. The fleet erupted in cheers. And today, Kyle said, his voice dropping so everyone leaned in, we add someone new to our brotherhood. Someone who risked everything to save a stranger. He turned to Mara. Mara of the Forgotten Island, you saved this captain's life. By the old laws of the free seas, you have a choice. Claim a blood debt I can never repay, or join this crew as an equal. I choose the crew, she said, her voice stronger than expected. If you'll have me. Kyle drew his sword and held it flat between them. Place your hand on the blade. Swear your oath. I swear to stand with this crew in storm and calm, to share in danger and fortune equally, to protect my brothers as they protect me, and to sail free until my last breath finds the sea. The fleet erupted in approval. Just like that, Mara was no longer a castaway. She was a pirate. Over the following weeks, Mara learned ship life. She trained with Rorik in swordplay, studied navigation with Senna the quartermaster, helped in surgery after skirmishes. But mostly, she spent time with Kale, talking for hours about their pasts, dreams and possibilities. One night, 3 weeks into their voyage, they stood at the prow beneath a sky full of stars. There are places I want to show you, Mara, Kyle said quietly. Islands where the sand is white as snow, port cities where cultures mix in beautiful chaos. Hidden coves where ancient temples crumble into the jungle. I want to see all of it, Mara said. Every island, every port, every secret the sea is hiding. Why me, Kale? Why show me these things? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you're the only person who saved me without wanting something in return. That's rarer than any treasure I've ever found. I'm not special. I'm just a girl who was abandoned. You're the girl who chose not to abandon someone else. That makes you extraordinary. He leaned in and kissed her, soft and tentative. Mara kissed him back, 7 years of loneliness melting into connection, into something that felt terrifyingly like hope. When they broke apart, breathless, a sharp whistle cut through the night, 3 short bursts. The signal for danger. Rorik appeared, his face grim. Captain, signal flags from the Crimson Dawn. They've spotted ships. At least 20, bearing the Ivory King's colors. They're following us, matching our course exactly. He's testing us, Kyle said, his jaw tight. Signal the fleet. Maintain course and speed. If they want to shadow us, let them. They'll learn we're not afraid. The next 3 days were tense. The Ivory King's ships maintained their distance like sharks circling prey. Mara helped where she could, and noticed the crew's suspicion of her shifting to respect. Then the ship lurched violently. On deck, chaos reigned. The Ivory King's ships had suddenly closed distance, but they weren't attacking. They were fleeing, because something worse is coming, Kyle said. Pointing north, a storm unlike any Mara had ever seen. A wall of black clouds reaching from ocean to sky, shot through with lightning that burned continuously like veins of fire in the darkness. That's a hellstorm, Senna breathed. A storm that doesn't follow the wind. Sailors say they're the ocean's rage made manifest. All hands, Signal the fleet, full speed northwest. We outrun this or we die." But the storm was faster. It swallowed ships at the rear of the fleet, their signal lanterns winking out one by one. A wave crashed over the deck, sweeping 3 sailors away. Kyle pulled Mara below deck just as the storm's full fury hit. They wedged themselves into a corner as the world turned into a nightmare of sound and violence. "This is it," Mara said, surprisingly calm. "This is how we die. No, we survive this, Mara, we survive." The ship rolled violently, throwing them across the cabin. Around them, the storm screamed like every sailor who had ever drowned, crying out in unison. And then silence. They climbed back to the deck and found themselves alone. The entire fleet, 46 other ships, hundreds of men gone. The ocean around the Serpent's Breath was mirror-smooth, lit by a sourceless silver light, and floating on the water's surface was a woman, ancient and ageless at once, her skin the color of deep water, her hair flowing like kelp. Her eyes were black as the abyss. Captain Kale, Mara of the Forgotten Island. "You have been chosen." Kale's sword was in his hand. Chosen for what? To carry a message, to make a choice. The Ivory King has made pacts with forces that should remain sleeping. If he is not stopped, the entire ocean will suffer. She raised her hand, and the water around the ship began to glow with bioluminescent light. "Your fleet is safe, scattered but safe. But first, you must make a choice. Pursue the Ivory King into waters darker than any storm. Face powers that will test everything you believe. Risk not just your lives, but your very souls. Or," Kyle asked, "or sail away. Find a quiet port. Live whatever life you can build away from this coming war. Honor or safety. There is no shame in either." Mara looked at Kyle, found him already watching her. "Your choice," he said quietly. "Whatever you decide, I follow." Mara thought of her island, 7 years of safety and loneliness. Thought of this ship, 3 weeks of danger and belonging. Thought of the little girl she'd been, who had dreamed of adventures in storybooks. That little girl would have said yes without hesitation. "We fight," Mara said. "We stop the Ivory King. We protect the ocean." The water woman smiled. "Then you are truly chosen. May the tides carry you safely. May your love be your anchor when all else fails." She sank back into the water, and the storm's eye collapsed. But this time, the Serpent's Breath rode the waves like it was born to them. Kale's hands on the wheel were sure and steady. Mara stood beside him, and together they sailed toward dawn. When the storm finally broke, they found the fleet regrouping on the horizon, battered but whole. Every ship accounted for, every soul intact.